Welcome back to Ivanti's Security Insights, where best practice cybersecurity meets real-world workplaces and roadblocks. I'm your host, Ashley Stryker, and with us today is our OG host, Chris Goettl, and our astounding queen of the night, Deputy CSO Amanda Wittern. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
Of course. No, it's always a great time. So I guess we'll just get things right off the bat here. I had an awkward turtle conversation with my father this weekend that I'm hoping you two can help me out with, and I swear this is relevant.
I can't wait.
I mean, with an intro like that, right? So my husband caught my dad, who was over visiting for a family wedding, trying to plug a mysterious USB that nobody knew about into random computers at my house. And my husband then told him that you need a USB condom for that, which led to flailing efforts to explain that. And then we ended up on a very bizarre rabbit hole down how Stuxnet worm ended up in the Iranian nuclear facility. And then that got us onto why air gapping is cool for security, which then brought up the things are more secure in the cloud conversation, which I've been hearing bandied around at Ivanti of late. And then my dad pipes up with, how could this possibly be more secure in the cloud than the thing I can see in the server closet where I can control access? And you know what? I figured instead of my butchering this, I would just ask you guys and then forward this link to him.
You just want us to tackle the last of those topics. We don't have to go into USB condoms. I mean, safe power's good, but I don't know if I have much more to add beyond that.
My father is a wastewater civil engineer, so I'd rather talk about USB condoms, Stuxnet, and on-prem versus cloud security than septic tank and wastewater treatment plants. So
I can see how that's an improvement. Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, and I'm if you guys could recommend though a specific condom that you prefer for your USBs, I can send the link to him so you don't have to explain. You know, just if you have a preference.
I am not opining on condoms of any kind.
Right. All right. So, cloud.
So
let's talk cloud. Yes. He was concerned about the security aspect, right?
Yes, and there were a couple different questions that were kind of brought up with this, and I guess we'll address the first one here. My dad is in his mid-50s. He's very much of he's adapted to the internet age pretty well. Like I think a lot of our successful businesses have. But there's still an element of what I can see and touch feels more real to me than something that is just randomly there in the cloud. And then there's a level of control that feels missing when it gets to the cloud. So trying to get him to wrap his head around the idea that the security controls that are in place in the cloud are superior to a physical lock and key on a closet door.
Physical security in data centers is so interesting. Like I really find the level of security, physical securities at a data center to be something out of a sci-fi movie.
All right, so let's start there then. So when you talk about moving something to the cloud versus having it stored in an on-prem hardware server or device at your place of business, what you're talking about is basically renting space out of giant master servers and supercomputers at data centers. So you're saying that the security at a data center, a professional data center, is sci-fi levels of cooler than the broom closet server closet.
Yeah. So if you just start with the physical security, one of my favorites that I saw, I was on site at a federal contractor. You know, they were looking at implementing a different rollout of how they were going to be patching and managing vulnerabilities. So we were talking through how to maintain or manage this product in their environment. I got to walk past. I didn't get to go in the data center. I only got to walk past the entry point. And my God, that was an amazing man trap. I mean, this thing was like multiple security guard checkpoints on either side of this thing, like glass on either side. There's somebody like able to push at a button to lock you in there. I mean, it's not just a closet door with a key that you're going to get through. So from a physical security perspective, already like steps above. And Amanda has much better stories about this because she actually got to go into some of these places.
So it's actually funny when I talk about it being out of a sci-fi movie, people have made it further into Area 51 than they have some of the data centers that I've been into. So, layer number one, even before you get to those man traps that Chris was talking about, is perimeter security. And from the very, very, very outside space of a data center, they've got these pylons that come out of the ground. Some of the pylons are even disguised as rocks. And these pylons are tested so that a vehicle could never drive into the side of the data center. And they're tested with semi-trucks that drive into them to stress test and make sure that even fully loaded, a vehicle can't smash into even the fenced area of the data center, much less into the data center itself. Then there's the fences. Yes, there's fences, which of course are lined with incredibly high definition cameras, as are on the building at every single point of the data center. The fences are electric. They also have monitoring. If there is a strong breeze or a tumbleweed bumps into the fence, people are alerted that there has been something going on. Cameras will focus on that area. It's insane, absolutely insane. On top of that, you've got heat sensors. They will, have a camera on top of the high def that are infrared, just to make sure that if someone is dressed up as a tumbleweed, they can still be picked up. And that this is just perimeter security, right? Where there's only one entrance point into a data center, just one. That's the only way that you can get in. It's usually a huge steel door that has no lock. It's, completely vault style, right? You can only get in with your, key code, biometrics. Sometimes it's a swipe card, but it's always at least two ways just to be able to enter the data center. Perimeter security is truly fantastic. I've always been very impressed.
You say that there's only one way into a data center, right? And they have these pylons. Is that just the one you visited, or is that basically every data center?
You'll actually typically have one entrance. So in a data center, which is any reputable cloud hosting company. So for example, AWS, Azure, they'll actually have 2 to 3 doors on the outside of a building for emergency exits. There's a separate set of walls and doors that actually get deeper into the data center that, again, only has one door. So just even getting to the man trap that Chris was talking about, which for those of you who don't know, the door closes behind you once you enter with a biometric scan and a key card. It closes behind you, and only after it's been closed will the next door in the hallway that you're in open. Of which, like Chris said, there's somebody standing behind the glass. They also have lasers that will track, including infrared, that only one person has entered the man trap at a time. And if more than one person enters, the trap will lock and has to be, cycled through a system, even to let either side open again. And that's just to get into the data center. And they're so careful about being able to maneuver around that. One of the data centers that I visited had a set of pipes that ran over the man trap, and I was hoisted onto the pipes to make sure that you couldn't crawl through, on top of them over the man trap. And that secondary wall, well, the outer wall as well, but that secondary wall, again, incredibly thick, rebarred concrete. So you're not even getting in there without significant effort and a jackhammer.
So physical security debunked, definitely better than what you can do on-prem.
Well, let me bring up, that's if your data is in one of those data centers, right? So let me bring up my dad's next point, which was, well, how do you know that my data is in one of these data centers? Couldn't they just have this as the show data center? Not that anyone ever goes there, but they have the show data center, and then they have your stuff in a random security closet because you're a rinky-dink business owner, or they don't love you or something. I don't know.
the reality is you don't. However, part of that is on purpose. The data centers cannot be marked. You would have no idea what the building was from the outside. They'll even have their own power grid that supplies them, plus your backup power. They're on their own grid, some of these large data centers. So the answer is you don't. However, and we can touch on this a little bit later, there are information that data centers or cloud hosted providers will provide to you where someone like me has gone into the data center and looked at it. Now, I'll tell you one more story about, making sure that it's not in someone's closet and rather is in a very reputable, researched, you want external auditors that have come in and look at things. I was tasked to going into what was a potential vendor for one of the largest banks in the world. And I had to go on site because there were sensitive things that I looked at. I got there early. It was pouring rain. It was an hour before I could even be let in. There was no coffee shops near. And so I'm standing there like a lost puppy in front of the door, and someone walks by and, hey, do you need in? And I said, well, I've got an appointment. That would be great, knowing that they absolutely should not have done that. Now, keep in mind, this is not a cloud provider. This is just a vendor who had, their own data in their local data center, right? So he lets me in. Huge no-no. There's a security desk of which there is no one there. There are cameras of the entire place, just open for me to see. I walked past the security desk, and the door into the server room was open. So, to sort of address the second point there, how do you know that, we've got these secure data centers? How do you know that my data is there, right? There's a couple of different ways. One is something like a SOC 2 report, which again would be provided. That's where a third party comes in and says, show me where everything is located. Or even more, does sort of like pen testing, doing certain activities that will make sure that the data is where it says it's going to be.
Climbing on pipes to make sure that the man trap is sufficiently protective, like that kind of pen testing.
More infrastructure related, right? Actually being able to trace data from one point to another, right? Okay, so not only it's both more a technical as well as the physical that I had the opportunity to do. But additionally, you've got to do your due diligence to make sure that you have a company that has third parties that can verify this. But additionally, a lot of providers will give certain information like the geography of where something is located that you can further use to gain comfort that the data isn't in Bob's closet in Indiana. Not anything against Indiana, but
Bob's closet's more the problem, not necessarily the standard. Bob,
yes.
Apologies to all Bobs with closets that are sufficiently
in Indiana.
In Indiana specifically, yes. I can understand why you wouldn't want to publish or publicize or even mark in any way what a data center is. It sounds like it's the technology version of a bank, basically. Like it's your data bank. Sorry, didn't quite mean that. So with that understood, though, how could knowing the geography of where your data server, where your data centers are, bring a certain level of comfort, or what about the geography could you see?
So that's probably the more important part about this conversation today. I think people have gotten past the security of these well-established large data centers, especially the AWSs, the Googles, the Microsoft environments, even the second tier. Security is not the bigger concern. The bigger concern is data sovereignty. Where is my data? So if you're in the EU, data sovereignty is a very important thing. If the data center for the vendor that you're trying to pick is in the US, well, that's pretty much a non-starter unless the company is headquartered in the US and just happens to have global sites. So now we enter into a whole ecosystem of back to that, where's my data? Which data center is it in? Wherever that data center is located, may have ramifications on whether or not you can choose that vendor. So think of geopolitical issues. If you had a data center in Russia or China, maybe, 10 years ago, that might have been a very different conversation. But now, those are areas where you have to have a data center there, you have to have a data center elsewhere, and you got to keep things very much across those international lines. Even with the UK, breaking away from the EU, that legally doesn't fully take effect until 2025. But companies in Europe are already looking at that saying, oh, I'm sorry, your data center's in the UK. I need to have that in, somewhere in the EU as it's going to be, basically. So data sovereignty is probably the bigger challenge. Privacy of data, knowing if you deal with most cloud platforms today, there's some level of AI, ML type, capabilities going on where, data is being taken and anonymized and used as kind of a crowdsourced way of showing, larger trends or different challenges like that. So I actually just had a customer that I literally had to, diagram out exactly when and how data was anonymized, where it traveled to, and how it was being used, so that they understood how their data was being utilized in that type of case. And even in extremely cautious cases, like we showed them, their data was being anonymized before it left their tenant. So within the data center that they were in, they had their tenant. Their data never left that tenant in a unanonymized fashion. It was sanitized before it left, and then it went through a second buffer before it went into what we call our data lake, which is where we actually do that the analysis on it to actually glean some, whatever type of telemetry we're trying to get from that information. So even that, went under a lot of scrutiny. Data sovereignty is probably the number one reason why companies are still somewhat cloud resistant in many cases.
So, and David, and just to make sure that I understand, data sovereignty is just the concept of who actually owns the data.
Not owns, where it is, because where the data is means that it's under certain legal jurisdictions.
Like that's the GDPR European question there.
Yep.
And
if my personal data stays within the solution that it's supposed to be in and is only used for things that it should be used for, it's meeting GDPR requirements. If that crosses certain borders, like a person from Germany did not authorize their data, their personal healthcare information, to be passed over to a data center in the US, that would be, a significant concern for them. So those are the types of things that really are the bigger barrier to cloud adoption more than anything else nowadays.
I have two questions then, and one has to do with accessing data on the cloud. When you have data sovereignty issues like that. So I'm based out of the United States. We're a global company, and we send emails to our European counterparts. The people who build the emails for me internally also work in the United States. Our database of emails contains GDPR needed compliant emails. Does my teams accessing them in the United States disrupt the data sovereignty if it's stored in GDPR compliant EU servers? So does my accessing it in the US when it's stored on an EU server end up breaking data sovereignty, or does the data actually have to travel out of that in order to disrupt it?
These regulations, like GDPR, are put in place to protect the people who own the data, whose data it is. They are put in place for the businesses, companies, services that handle that type of protected data. It's not just GDPR, right? There's some UAE regulations, and I can tell you what we're doing from an information security perspective, because not only is it in our best interest as providing services to make sure that we're compliant with these things, it's also the regulatory requirements themselves, right? Everyone, businesses included, need to be law-abiding citizens. So we're not unaware of those requirements. the thing is that you, Ashley, as a user, we'll call it an internal user, who has access to these emails that may be located in other places, you as a user don't know. However, my whole job in information security is to make sure that you don't have to. So some of the initiatives that we do, for example, I do want to bring up again, third-party assessors. We have people that we pay as independent auditors to come in and look over everything that we do. We willingly provide them everything that they can. And even if we weren't willing, it is their job to make sure they get everything they need. Because ultimately, both us as the company, as well as the assessor, are putting our name saying, we do comply with this. So we might touch on this a little bit later, but there is a level of shared responsibility. You, as the consumer of a cloud service, need to make sure that you're requesting these reports that would have a third party that comes in and says, absolutely, this has been covered. You would want to make sure that you have read the terms of service or that your contract with that company covers your security concerns. You need to make sure that you understand your responsibility for your own data so that it is secure. So the extension for that, the company's responsibility, is not only verified by third parties, but by multiple departments. I think, Chris, you brought up privacy. There is legal, obviously information security, which is my plug. The sole purpose of those departments in a company is to accomplish exactly what we're talking about here. How do we keep data safe? Our data, your data. How do we make sure that it complies with all of these regulations, as well as best practice? We have some controls in place to address risks that there isn't a requirement of, but we can see that there's a potential vulnerability. So part of that would be the shared responsibility. You've got to make sure that what you know is a risk is addressed when you contract. Even the terms of service, when you click, yes, I accept for your telephone bill, right? That kind of stuff. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that it's not just the integrity of a company, but also that there are requirements that do protect you as a consumer and do make sure that your data doesn't have a breach of your customers or even just your personal data where it's in a place where it's not supposed to be.
Like poor Bob's closet in Indiana. Poor Bob. We're just picking on you today. Love you. Well, I guess that brings me then. So let's move to this shared responsibility kind of idea, because this is an interesting thing. We're running a survey right now in the field that's kind of talking about and asking people what they think their responsibility for security is. So I'll pitch you this question, having an idea of how you'll answer. If physical security and someone actually physically breaking in or electronically breaking into a data center to access data in the cloud is not a security concern, what is the biggest security threat to data in the cloud from an average company?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest risks there are, data in transit, data at rest. Is the data being secured properly? And again, that's where things like a SOC 2 audit and other, like you see most countries now have some type of government level cloud environment as well, whether it's, US has FedRAMP, Australia, Germany. I was just in the Netherlands recently, and they have one that's going to be launching soon as well. Those types of environments have yet even more certifications and requirements that you have to go through to get compliant there. So a lot of times that's going to focus on, not only the data or the security of like the system itself, but the data security that all of those requirements are being met as well. So that part of it is definitely important. The other part really is how is that data being used? So you have to be very clear in the terms of the terms of service, and in, explaining, to an adequate level how that data might be used in some way. And most of the GDPR fines that have been given out, there's some that were, security related, like they didn't take adequate security steps. Most are just the usage of that data once it was kind of given into the hands of that vendor was abused, whether it was kind of doled out to a third party for additional analysis or other things like that. Many of the large infractions from a privacy standpoint have been in the usage of that data.
So it's not how it's stored or the fact that it's in the cloud. It's people like me doing silly things like randomly downloading an unencrypted Excel sheet of all of our German clients. Not that I've ever done that. Boss lady, please do not come at me. This is just an example. I don't even have access to those things. Hypothetically, but that's so the danger, the security danger, though, isn't the data in for us, because we've made sure that that's all secure. Thank you, Amanda's team. My hypothetical example of the emails from Germany trying to email those people, it's me as the end user, as the company, and what I do with that data and how I treat my access to that data. That's a big security risk for data in the cloud.
Let me make a distinction here, right? There is a difference between what we would call a cloud provider, where they are providing a space for your data, or even SaaS, like we offer, where there is a place for your data, but it's the ability to manipulate your data to do a certain thing, right? Then there's also a scenario where you give your data to a vendor so that they can do something with it. And the reason I want to make a distinction there is that there are certain controls that are in place that would prevent, for example, you being able to access that data at all. We have the environment, or a data center can have the environment and have zero ability to access that data, because you, as the consumer, have the ability to encrypt your data. You can put the controls in place of who can access it, how it can be transferred in and out. So obviously there is a risk in certain circumstances where you don't want somebody who has your data to do something inappropriate with it, or how they then precipitate that data, whether they sell it to a third party. But part of that shared responsibility model that I was talking about is in the circumstances that I think your dad was asking about. The company themselves don't have that access in the first place, even if they have the ability to get to the data at all, which they, in cloud service providers, especially in things like data centers or with us, we don't even have access to the ability to access your data. And again, part of the shared responsibility, you have the ability to set those controls. You have the ability to make sure in the contract that it's not, designated to third parties. You have the ability to make sure that they're compliant with HIPAA and GDPR and have these other controls in place. So, I'd leave you with the fact that, yes, things like physical security, obviously we've got checked. Other things like other things that a cloud service provider will provide, they do provide. But you will have your own responsibility, regardless of where your data is, to make sure that your data is safe. And specifically for cloud service providers or, companies that have that type of model, you are responsible for things like who has access to the data, because we do not. You do. And so if you don't want your data moved somewhere else, your employees need to make sure that they have the access, appropriate training, access is restricted. And then one final point there is that a lot of these risks that we're talking about and controls that I'm suggesting here are especially important when you migrate to the cloud. Because again, until it reaches that point, the responsibility is how you handle your data. And so that would, in my mind, be where a person like your dad should really be concerned, is making sure that when you move it from the server of Bob in Indiana, that you move it safely and put the safeguards in place so that when it gets to that secure environment that I would absolutely advocate for, and I think Chris would wholeheartedly agree, at the safety of that in transit and before it gets there, that it's absolutely safe and secure. And once it gets there, that you do everything that you have the ability to do and that is your responsibility, which will be clearly designated, that you also put those controls in place. It's two people working together for the same goal.
Yeah, I mean, if you Google a lot of the largest cloud data breaches that have occurred, many of them were a database that was configured incorrectly. It was either not encrypted or on access was not restricted fully, and that's what was exposing that the way that the attackers got at the data. So, I mean, many of the big ones.
Access control, user controls, open passwords,
data, exactly.
Encryption.
Yep.
Those
so that's
are
part of that shared responsibility. The cloud provider needs to give you the facilities to do these things. You need to actually do said things.
Facilities and infrastructure controls too, right? We want to make sure that your data isn't exposed to the internet, right? So yeah, in addition to those physical, certainly we have those technical controls as well. But again, exactly Chris's point, there is a point in which you have the ability and should make sure that you have your own controls in place so that you do know your part and what you need to be doing.
Well, I think this is a comprehensive answer to my dad's question. I will report back on what he thinks of the episode. I will ping the family chat with this. If like, hey, you thought this was done? Nah, man. And with that, thank you both for being willing to play ball with this. I know this was a kind of a random intro here. And thank everybody here for listening today. If you'd like to continue today's conversation, especially if you've either had personal experience with other people asking about security in the cloud, and have been to a data center and have tried to break in. No, really, I want to hear. Please follow us online at Go Ivanti. That's IVANTI. And please join the conversation there. I will be watching. I'm very curious. And please do check out the show notes for links to any and all relevant information, including some links. Because I think, Chris, you have a preferred source for the most GDPR fines. I think I saw that you are floating around. So we'll make sure those are all in the show notes for you as well. And if you found today's conversation remotely entertaining, interesting, or would like to bust some myths that your own organization or team needs, please share this with anybody you think should hear it. The more you share, the more we can reach other InfoSec people like yourself. So with that, we're signing off for now. Stay safe and talk soon. Bye.